All right, good morning, everybody. So today's Q&A. You know what? Before we start any questions, I'm gonna give you an update about what's going on this channel today. Um, this is Saturday the 15th, and um, so a lot has been going on. One of the big things that we're working on right now is getting Tiger Music Store back up to what it was, actually better than what it was. I don't know how much of that we told you guys. Um, but yeah, the for those of you that didn't know, we have a music store. If you put Tiger, just like the word Tiger, musicstore.com, that will send you to our music store where we sell my books and my compositions, and also modules, which there aren't many up right now, but yes, we're trying to do this module thing. The idea behind the modules is that with a module, you don't have to buy the whole book, right? So with a module, and the idea for the modules came from the uh, the fact that the daily routines books. So you have the my daily routines book, the Chops Express book. Both of those two have 7 routines in them for 7 different levels of trumpet student. Okay, so so and it used to be, and this is the way it should have been back in the old days, that when you bought the book, you bought all of the routines. Even if you were only a beginner, you had to buy the whole book. Why? Because that was more expedient when everything was being printed. You didn't want to have um, 8 different book versions of the book. Trevor Holmes. Hey, Anthony Lenzo, how are you doing? I'm doing good this morning. And so we have thoughts on Trevor Holmes. Let me look up Trevor Holmes. I've never heard of him. Is this a trumpet player? So, I'm looking at, let's see here. Probably not a good idea to play a video while I'm doing a live chat, huh? Um, yeah, I don't know anything about this guy. So, oh, congratulations, Anthony. Um, Nice to get a new horn, huh? I enjoy getting new horns. I don't get them very often. So, yeah. So I don't even know who this Trevor Holmes guy is. So I apologize for that. I don't know if I'm supposed to know. But when I'm looking up here on Google, it looks like he's a young trumpet player, high school division 2019. So I'll tell you what I do think about, um, because when someone says, "What are my thoughts about somebody?" usually what they're asking is, "Do I think this person's any good?" or stuff like that, right? And if that's not what you mean, you can clarify. Um, but you know what? When you spend even a little bit of time on YouTube, when you spend even just a little bit of time on YouTube, you find, okay, so there are literally thousands of great trumpet players on YouTube. And of those thousands, of at least a couple thousand that are just high school students. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration on the high school students, but you get my drift, right? There are so many great players, and I see that he competed in the NTC, so which means he's probably pretty good, right? The way I see these competitions, the competitions are I'm not. First of all, let me not give the wrong impression. I'm not putting the competition down. I think they play a very serious part in our trumpet community. But that said, oh, okay. So he's been first chair. Are you mean like Allstate? First chair Allstate. Is that what you're talking about? And is that classical band or is it orchestra? First chair what? If you don't mind me asking. Because, so here's how I feel about these competitions. The competitions help open up opportunities for you. There's a video that I did. Okay, so so was it orchestra? Is that what you're saying? Yes to the orchestra. I'm sorry. Classical. So you know that here's the way that Allstate works for classical. If I'm not mistaken, that might be what you're talking about. First chair, because what happens is you get to choose whether you want to be an orchestra or band, right? So if he was first, that means he made first at area, because there's no such thing as first. Like what you're saying there, first overall, that would be first at area. Okay, and to tell you the truth, you may not know this, but I made first at area. My junior year, in the area that I was in was on the west, El Paso and Lubbock and all those areas. Okay, it's kind of a long snake area. First chair in the symphony orchestra. Okay, good. So that is considered a little bit more prestigious with the orchestra, but I think that's changed over the years, right? It didn't used to be as prestigious when I was in school. The orchestra wasn't as prestigious as the band, and in fact, it was actually rare in the 80s. It was rare for people to even audition for the orchestra. I guess it's still true like that today too, because it happened so early in the year. Anyway, so talking about the competitions, I believe that the competitions are extremely important. But the competitions, and this is the part that depending on what kind of personality you have, right, you don't want to hear this. The competitions don't mean anything. And that sounds harsh, right? But we're taught in band. The way we're taught in band is that there's this hierarchy of great players and not so great players and all that stuff. But you know what? Someone has to choose that hierarchy. It's not God that says you're the best and you're not as good. There's a human, there's a flawed human being that's making that decision. In the case of Allstate, for example, in the case of Allstate, it's going to be 5 flawed human beings, right? And that kind of sort of helps make it a little bit more fair, but it doesn't make it more truthful. I'm going to have to do something. Okay, there we go. Ta-da! All right, so So that's how I feel. And I have a video about I'll put this in the comments if I remember, um, a video about how the competitions work. Okay, there we go. All right, so the way the competitions work, and I'm just going to summarize here real quick, is that when they choose the order of who's best and who's not best, it's based on their personal preferences. It is not based on a universally accepted standard. There is no universally accepted standard. Doesn't exist. Okay? It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Okay? So that's why you can have, for example, people in one part of Texas making first chair in region and then go to area and not even get close to first chair because the people who are in charge, oh, okay, very good. You saw the video. Wow. So anyway, I know this is a long way of going about this, but when you look at the competitions that way, and then you take a step back and look at the individual and what they have to say as a musician. So, okay, almost always the ones who consistently come up at first chair every single time, those are going to be great players. However, there's one thing that I said in a recent video, that you might sound impressive and not sound any good, right? You might be able to do stuff that nobody else can do. And you might, and I've seen this so many times. I've gone to concerts where you've got people who are just awesome trumpet players, and half of the audience is falling asleep. Like this, right? And it's an amazing phenomenon to me. It's an amazing phenomenon because you can tell that intellectually these people are acknowledging that what they just heard was phenomenal, and yet it can't keep them awake. Just consider that, right? As phenomenal as it is, if it doesn't have what I call that human connection, no matter how good it is, it will put you to sleep. Now, I'm not saying anything about this guy. Okay, what up here? Trevor Holmes. I'm not saying anything about him. I don't know anything about him, because it is quite possible for someone who wins first chair all the time and makes a human connection. That's something that it's not an either or. It can be both ways. What we can't do is assume that because someone keeps winning competitions that they also have that human connection thing. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay? Just because someone is a great player doesn't mean that they make great music. Okay? That's I think right now, I always have these little focuses, topics that I focus on, and I'll focus on it for 6 weeks or so and really, really dig deep into the concept before I move on to focus on something else, right? And this is the one that I'm working on right now. This is what I'm really digging deep into right now, is partly the human connection part of it, and then because of the human connection, the difference between a great player and someone who has like human value, someone that you could, because, and a great example of this is that sax player Ornette Coleman, right? That guy was so bad, and I mean bad in a sense from the people who were playing with him thought he was bad. Okay, before he became famous, he was already starting to do the stuff that was creating that human connection for him and his music. And he was on a gig doing this stuff in Fort Worth. I think he's from Fort Worth. And after the gig, the other guys in the band confronted him. And when he told them what he was up to, they beat the guy up. Because in their minds, what he was doing was playing bad on purpose. That guy went on to be how we have like Louis Armstrong and Ori were the forefathers of early jazz, and then we have Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were the forefathers of modern jazz and bebop, and then we have Art Blakey as the forefather of hard bop. We have those different movements like that, right? Ornette Coleman was the forefather of free jazz. But to create, and a lot of people still today listen to his stuff and say he's out of tune. They have like a lot of criticisms about what he's doing, and they'll say that the music just sounds bad. But what he was doing really was creating a human connection. You know what? Another example of this human connection, and I apologize for using just jazz analogies, because I can't readily think of, well, actually, yes, I can. Let me do the jazz one, and then I'll move on to a classical example. Okay. Billie Holiday was famous for having only an octave range. And I'm not an authority on Billie Holiday, so don't think. So if I get some of this wrong, please forgive me. But here's the cultural stuff I remember being handed down to me. So the way she would sing All of Me would be like, all of me, why not take all of me, right? Instead of all of me, right? She would compress the melody into this short span, and look at what that did. And it was years ago that I came up with this philosophy because of people like Billie Holiday, people like Miles Davis, people who had limitations but still became extremely successful, extremely famous. These people, I think what the reason why we connect with them so well is because of their limitations. I think the reason why we connect with Billie Holiday is because instead of having no boundaries, there's trumpet players that can do amazing stuff, and they do they can play all this stuff high and low and all that stuff. They don't have any boundaries, right? And then you have somebody like Miles who had boundaries and would hit that boundary and push against that boundary in his playing. And that struggle, and it's not just those two, right? I've started seeing it in my students. I've started seeing it in my own playing. There's a book, I forget the guy's name, where he actually talks about that in jazz, that this struggle is actually part of the music. So if you only ever do in your improvisation, for example, what is easy for you to do, then the struggle isn't communicated to your audience. So I really think that human connection comes from you having the what, I don't know what to call it, having the the guts. There's other words for that. Having the guts to get in front of people and show them your weaknesses. Think about how that connects. Now, one more example before I answer this next question. Okay. In classical music. So normally we don't see what I'm talking about in jazz as much as we do in classical music, because the whole concept of classical music is to perfect the music. And you're less likely to show people the flawed side of who you are, right? So classical music has a different feel. So, but I was in the El Paso Symphony for 2 years, and it was on a lower, I forget what they used to call that. It was on a lower circuit, so that the people coming through and being our guest soloists tended to be either really young or really old. They weren't the main ones in, the main popular ones at that time. At least that's what I was told back in the 80s. Okay. So we had, for example, Joshua Bell before he was really famous, right? He was already real good. But the ones I want to use as an example were the old guys. Because when there's people who had a really great career, but they're now at the end of their career, and maybe they're not as technically proficient as other younger players, right? But what you got from their performances was something so much deeper and more profound. And that human connection that I'm talking about was so present in those older artists. And so, yes, and I know this is a long about way of saying what I'm saying about the competitions and someone, my opinion about someone, Trevor Holmes, because he's so good at the high school level. You know what I tell people, and this might not apply to him. Actually, it sounds kind of offensive if you are a high school player. I always say, I don't care how good you are, you're still in high school. So I guess that's kind of offensive, but it's true. Do you know what? A lot of that stuff, we get so wrapped up in who won what competition, and we think that's what makes somebody good. And actually, that's not how it works, right? So, on to the next question. What's a really good C trumpet to use? Well, I really think I'm going to give you the answer that I think probably most appropriate, depending on, I'm assuming that if you're looking for a C trumpet in today's day and age, the reason why you're using a C trumpet is because you want to play classical music and you want to do it properly, right? So like if you're in an orchestra, that's what's done today. You're supposed to play on a C trumpet because that's the culture. And those of you who have been watching my videos know how I feel about the culture, right? And the culture says you use a C trumpet. Okay? So, typically we say that the Bach is the best C trumpet, right? And the reason they say that is because of, once again, we're going back to the culture. What we're looking for in the sound is that sound. Now, I think it's different now that they've changed people at the factory. I don't think we're looking at the same quality that we used to. So maybe if you want to be a great orchestral player, maybe look for an older Bach. Okay. Now here's the thing with the Bach instruments, and I've never had the resources to do this, but with the Bach instruments, really the right way to do it is you go somewhere where they have like 20, 30 trumpets to try, and you pick, and we're talking about 20, 30 trumpets of the same model. Okay? Because in at least back when Bach was the instrument to have for the C trumpet, there was very little consistency from one instrument to the next. So you would try this instrument, you would try that instrument, the same model number. Now that's something that's different with Yamaha. In my opinion, the way Yamaha does it, now this is, you got to take what I say here with a grain of salt, because I'm not much of a horn, just because of the limited resources I've had. But this is what I understand about the difference between Yamaha and Bach. Yamaha is more consistent. So like if you try your buddy's Yamaha and then order one of the same model, the chances are those two horns are going to play the same. I even did this with my piccolo. My piccolo trumpet is the exact same model as my piccolo trumpet is the exact same model Yamaha as my buddy Daryl Bear's piccolo trumpet. We've switched exactly the same horn. Okay. Yes, I'll answer this question in a second. Okay. So I will say that if you go with a Yamaha and you find something that works for you, you can actually order that and expect it to be the same. With the Bachs, at least the old Bachs, you need to try them out. But I'm gonna close my discussion on the C trumpets with one mention, because the reason I don't have a C trumpet right now, I sold my C, and it's because my Bach C, and this is why I don't try instruments anymore. This is why I don't try, like I won't ever try a Monet, because I know I can't afford a Monet, and it can really screw with your head. Okay. I tried a Blackburn C trumpet, and then I went back to my Bach, and I'm like, I can't play on that Bach C trumpet. So I've been waiting all this time. It's been like over 10 years now. I've been waiting all this time to save up enough money to get a Blackburn, and the problem with that is the Blackburns keep getting more and more expensive. I went to ITG last year, and just to check to see if it was just my imagination that the Blackburn was so good, and I went to the same model as what I had tried in the past. And as far as I'm concerned, for me personally, that's the thing, is all of this stuff is personal. But for me personally, I'm not going to buy another C trumpet until I can get myself a Blackburn. And that might mean I never get a C trumpet. I don't know. We'll see. Because there's other stuff that's more important for me to get first. And so, all right. So that's my thoughts on a C trumpet. Now, are South Texas players at a disadvantage from the metro areas? We're talking about, I'm assuming we're talking about Allstate. I'm going to say yes and no. I know that sounds like a political answer. You know, the more, let's put it this way, the more technology evolves, the less true that's going to be. Now, let me explain to you the nature of that disadvantage. Okay? The nature of that disadvantage is not hierarchical. Okay? It's not that the people in Brownsville are less good than the people in Fort Worth. That's not how this works. The musical values of people in the valley are different from the musical values from the people in the city. Okay? The musical values are different. This is why, by the way, I don't know if you're into the Jazz All-State, but it used to be that the Jazz All-State was done in the judging was done in the big cities, um, Dallas or Houston mostly, right? The time when they changed it, it's been 2 years now, I think, since they changed it. And it's interesting to look at which high schools, when they moved it to El Paso, it's interesting to look at which high schools dominated. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the musical values of big city musicians are different from the musical values of the smaller town musicians. So if the judges are from the larger metropolitan areas, they're going to judge those musicians based on metropolitan principles for music. Now, there are some people out there, and I disagree. There are some people out there who think, and these are mostly metro people, right? There's some people out there who believe that, well, the metro stuff is where all the art stuff is happening, so therefore they have a better understanding of how all this works. And I completely disagree with that. Because music is cultural. It's not science, it's not math. There are scientific elements, there are mathematical elements, but as a whole, it's a cultural cultural art form. It's a cultural medium. What we do in our community, that's right for us. So you can have, for example, someone from Houston or someone from Dallas who was trained and taught here or in Dallas. Go to somewhere like Brownsville. And now it depends on how because you can go, I've lived in small towns before. I understand that a lot of times the musicians will be, when someone from another town comes in, they'll be self-sacrificing. They'll be like, oh, you're so good because you're from someplace that we're not, right? People here in Houston do that with people from New York, right? And I've seen it happen. I've actually seen it happen with me, where I go to a small town to talk to the trumpet players. And, it's like they consider themselves nobody because I'm somebody. And I'm somebody because I'm from some city. So ignoring that possibility, right? It's possible that someone, let's say, moves to Brownsville, moves to McAllen, and for the way that culture is there, that person from the big city won't be doing it right. And that's where the problem is, because the way we're taught, right? The way we're taught is that there's a right way and a wrong way, and they give you the impression that everybody in the world has that same set of musical values. And that's just not true. Those musical values change from culture to culture. Okay? Those, and it's okay, so I'm talking about musical values. All values change from culture to culture, right? Why would that be any different for music, right? Okay? So the nature of that disadvantage that we're talking about is cultural. It's not musical. It's not, did you play fast enough? Did you play accurately enough? Did you play it right? That's not what this is about. I mean, it can be about that. I mean, if you're playing badly, then it's not going to go well, right? I mean, if you can't get the notes, stuff like that. Um, but the question is, why would you not get the notes? Okay, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so I hope that answered the question. Um, what else? When we first logged on, I was talking about, what was I talking about? Oh, I can't even remember. I know that I stopped talking about it. We were talking about the modules. That's what it was. We were talking about modules. So the old, since I finished that question, okay. The modules. Oh, you know what? Let me. This is sounding confusing. One other thing about this rural versus metro, rural versus urban thing. The more we have technology developed, the less true that's going to be, because now all of the cultures are merging. Okay? The fact that someone in the valley can be watching this video, right? And not just my video. Okay? And so you're not only getting the like the recordings that I post, but you're also getting the values. So these values that I was talking about culturally are now being spread more evenly across the nation. Okay, not just in fact, the world, across the world. All right. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Now, going back to the whole thing with the modules, basically what a module is we've taken the different routines and started selling them individually, because now with digital technology you can do that. With digital technology, it's actually more convenient to publish the routines separately, and even physically. So when I say digital technology, I'm not just talking about ebooks. Because of digital technology, I don't have to have 30. I don't have to buy 30 books of that one book at a time. See, that's what was holding us back before. Because every book we wanted to sell, we had to buy a minimum of 30 copies of that book. And so if you put all of the routines into one book, you can reach more people that way, because that book has something for everybody. Well, now in this digital age, I don't have to have the book physically in my possession. So you have the ability either to get an ebook or to purchase on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or whatever the physical book that's just that one routine. because I don't have to have all that overhead to have that book in stock. So that's the difference. That's what's different. So we call those separated books modules. So, for example, if you have a module is usually going to have between 1 to 20 exercises in it instead of a whole book of exercises. And those 1 to 20 exercises will be very specific. Let's say, for example, now these haven't been published yet, but one of the plans for the future is to offer modules of the different tonalization studies just for the one key that you need. So let's say you're working on the key of D flat, and you want to use the tonalization studies to help you learn D flat. You can just buy D flat. You don't have to buy the whole book. Does that make sense? So that's something we've been working on, is getting the music store up. That's why I was talking about this. The music store has, we've got your sheet music, we've got the books. And by the way, one switch we made is we're only selling, because you can get this stuff physically elsewhere, we're only selling digital products at the store now. So you can get ebooks, you can get sheet music, and then the broken up books that we call modules. Okay, so and other stuff that's going on. So this is behind the scenes stuff. We had to get a new Wi-Fi adapter. So I went 2 days this week without being able to do a bunch of work because we had to go get the adapter and get that installed. And I couldn't just go out and get it right away when it broke down. So I was, had to get it yesterday because of this today. This is on the new Wi-Fi. Actually, it's a faster Wi-Fi, so it's going to help make the Skype lessons go better. It's going to help make these streaming things go better. All right. What else has been happening? I should have written this down. Yeah, I can't remember now. There was something I was going to say. Anyway, so unless there's any other questions, we went long last week. It looks like we'll go short this week unless one of you guys has another question for me. Yeah, I know we only had, I think, 3 questions, and I took a long time to answer them, but those answers, one of my subscribers says he loves my deep stuff, right? Well, that's what you get with me, is the deep stuff. I'm not just going to say, if you say, which is the best trumpet, I'm not going to say, oh, get a Bach. Right? That doesn't work for me. Because then later you'll say, I thought you said get a Bach, and here I am playing on a Blackburn, right? So that's just the way I operate. I can't just give those one-word answers like that. That's also why it takes me so long to respond to an email, because everybody else's emails are 2 lines long, and I'm like writing a whole essay. So anyway, all right. So I guess that's it for today. Thank you guys for your questions, and I've got other videos coming out. Part of the reason why the educational videos have slowed down is because I've been spending my video time learning doodly, and it's not actually so hard to learn, I don't know why it took me so long to figure it out, but yes, I've got a transposition video coming out soon, very soon, actually, because I've got it all set up. There's just a few more things I have to add, and then I have to edit the video. But that's why it's been less of those videos coming up, because I really wanted to learn how to use that software. And there was no other way to justify doing that than to use my video time for that. So there will be more educational videos coming up. That's one of the things actually I was going to share with you what's going on. So I decided that these Q&As are going to start with me just giving you guys channel updates, because there is stuff going on behind the scenes that maybe some of you might be interested in. I said starting with, I don't mean starting with, but somewhere in the video we will probably do channel updates. I think because this is the first time I tried to do that, I think next time I'll have the channel updates written down before I start, because I'm pulling a blank now. Anyway, so that's what I've got for you. Feel free to ask questions during the week when you have them, and I can respond to them during this time. I will probably do another one next week. It's the following week that I won't be doing this, because I'll be on the road. And in fact, you know what? Well, no, next week. Next week I was thinking. So the other thing that might make me not do this is if I have a late gig the night before, and I mean late, like getting home at 1 or 2 in the morning. I'm not going to do a live stream the next morning. So, but I just realized my gig on Friday next week is a show, so I'll be home at a reasonable hour. Anyway, so that's what I got. God bless you guys. We'll see you on the next video.